Throughout history, animals have been trained, used, and even sacrificed in war. But some military experiments went so far, they're almost impossible to believe. Today we'll count down the 10 cruelest experiments ever done with animals, ranked from shocking to absolutely horrifying. Number 10. They weren't soldiers, but they flew into enemy fire, dropped behind enemy lines with one mission: spy from the skies. These were pigeons equipped with automatic cameras during World War I. Military engineers strapped tiny devices to their chests, then released them over combat zones. As the birds flew, the cameras took timed photos of enemy positions. It sounds harmless, until you realize these pigeons were flying straight into gunfire. Many never returned. Some were shot down, others captured, and most were lost in the chaos of war. Despite their size, their work was so valuable that some were even decorated for bravery. Unknowingly sent on missions, they would rarely survive. A silent operation with deadly consequences. Number 9. They trained it to guide missiles by pecking at a screen. A bizarre Cold War experiment where one small bird held the fate of an entire weapon. This was Project Orcon, short for Organic Control. The US military attempted to use pigeons to guide missiles by teaching them to peck at the image of a target on a screen. The pecking would adjust the missile's course mid-flight. 3 pigeons were placed inside the nose of a missile, staring at a screen, constantly tapping to keep the target centered. If one bird hesitated, the others would correct the path. It was strange, it was real, and it nearly worked. Though the project was eventually canceled, the pigeons endured months of intense training, stress, and confinement, all for a job they never understood. One of the weirdest and most overlooked attempts to weaponize nature. Number 8. They jumped into war, with no choice but to follow orders. In the chaos of World War II, one group of soldiers didn't wear helmets, they wore fur. These were the British parachuting dogs. Specially trained canines were dropped from planes alongside troops during the Normandy invasion. Their missions? Detect landmines, warn of enemy movement, and boost morale in the trenches. Dogs like Bing and Brian were outfitted with tiny parachutes and launched into war zones. Some even carried medical supplies or radio parts. It sounds heroic, but it was also cruel. These animals had no way to understand what was happening. Many were injured or killed during jumps, shot in combat, or traumatized by explosions. To the soldiers, they were companions. To the military, they were tools. To history, they remain silent veterans of a war they never chose. Number 7. To steer a missile, the military turned to a cat. But this wasn't just any tracking device. This was a living, wired feline. Introducing the Acoustic Kitty Project, a CIA experiment during the Cold War. The goal? Transform an ordinary cat into a mobile spy. They surgically implanted a microphone in its ear canal, a radio transmitter at the base of its skull, and a long antenna along its spine. The idea was to release the cat near enemy embassies and eavesdrop on conversations as it wandered undetected. But there was one major flaw: cats don't follow orders. In the very first field test, the cat ran into traffic and was immediately killed. After years of painful experiments and millions of dollars spent, the project was scrapped. No intelligence gathered, no success. Just one of the strangest and most tragic attempts at animal espionage in history. Number 6. Massive, powerful, drugged before battle. In ancient warfare, they were the tanks, with tusks. We're talking about war elephants, but not just any elephants. Some commanders gave them intoxicants or stimulants before sending them charging into enemy lines. From India to Carthage, elephants were used to trample troops, break formations, and terrify horses. But to make them even more aggressive, they were often fed alcohol or herbs that altered their behavior, turning these intelligent animals into uncontrollable weapons of destruction. The result? Chaos. Sometimes the drugged elephants panicked, turned around, and crushed their own armies. Centuries later, these tactics are seen not just as reckless, but brutally inhumane. Weapons of war, fueled by fear and chemicals. From pigeons and cats to elephants drugged into madness, the cruelty is escalating. But these next 5 cases, they go beyond strange. They reveal just how far militaries were willing to go, no matter the cost to the creatures involved. Number 5. They swam silently. And sometimes, they were trained to kill. In the shadows of the Cold War, dolphins became tools of underwater warfare. Both the US and Soviet navies developed secret programs to train dolphins for military operations. These animals were used to detect underwater mines, guard harbors, and even attack enemy divers. Some dolphins were fitted with devices to deliver explosives, others with syringes meant to inject air into the bloodstream of intruders. Military officials claimed the animals weren't harmed, but insiders and leaked reports suggest otherwise. Intense isolation, unnatural environments, and missions that turned them into living weapons. Highly intelligent, deeply social, and completely exploited. What was once a symbol of peace became a soldier in a silent, unseen war. Number 4. They were small, silent, and packed with explosives. This was not science fiction. It was a real British plan to blow up factories with rats. During World War II, the British Special Operations Executive created what they called explosive rats. They stuffed dead rats with plastic explosives and intended to scatter them near German boilers. The idea? Workers would toss the rats into the furnace, triggering deadly explosions. Although the project was discovered by the Nazis before it could be deployed, the sheer concept is chilling. Dozens of rats were dissected, filled with charges, and carefully sewn shut, just to become disposable traps. The Germans were so disturbed by the idea that they launched a full investigation, fearing more animal-based sabotage. It never went operational, but it showed just how far desperation could push military innovation. Even the dead weren't safe from war. Number 3. Thousands were burned alive, before the plan was even tested in combat. This was Project X-Ray, America's secret weapon made of bats. In World War II, US scientists devised a bizarre plan. Attach tiny incendiary bombs to bats, store them in refrigerated canisters, then drop them over Japanese cities at dawn. As the bats warmed up, they'd fly into buildings, especially wooden ones, and ignite fires across a wide area. The logic? One bat could start a fire, 1,000 could burn a city. But the tests went horribly wrong. In one trial, bats escaped and set fire to a US military base. Thousands died during transport and experimentation, often burning alive or suffocating in cramped containers. Project X-Ray was eventually canceled, but not before countless animals were sacrificed in a campaign that never left the lab. An experiment born from desperation and buried in flames. Number 2. They were loyal, they obeyed, and they were turned into living bombs. During World War II, the Soviet army trained dogs to destroy enemy tanks by sacrificing themselves. Known as anti-tank dogs, these animals were fitted with explosives and taught to run under moving tanks. A trigger on their back would detonate the bomb upon contact, destroying the vehicle and instantly killing the dog. The training was brutal. Dogs were starved, then fed only under tanks to associate them with food. But in real battle, they often panicked. Many ran back towards Soviet lines, only to be shot by their own soldiers before they could explode. Some succeeded in their mission, but success meant death. Thousands of dogs were used. Almost none survived. It was loyalty twisted into tragedy. Man's best friend turned into a weapon. We've seen pigeons guiding missiles, cats turned into microphones, dogs trained to dive under tanks, and bats that set entire bases on fire. But nothing compares to the final experiment, a project so cruel it crossed every ethical line and left its test subjects to die in slow, silent agony. Number 1, they didn't fight, they didn't run. They simply sat and died. At the height of the nuclear arms race, both the US and the Soviet Union used monkeys as live test subjects for atomic weapons. Dozens of primates were placed in cages near nuclear blast sites, sometimes restrained in chairs, hooked to monitors. forced to stare at the flash of detonation. Scientists studied how radiation, heat, and shock waves affected their bodies in real time. Some were vaporized instantly. Others survived the initial blast, only to suffer days or weeks of agony from radiation poisoning, blindness, organ failure, neurological collapse. These were not simulations. They were real deaths, recorded, logged, and buried in silence. The justification? To understand how nuclear war would affect human soldiers. But the cost was paid in innocent lives, lives that never had a choice, a cruel legacy written in fallout and fur.